Hello, everyone. I hope your Wednesday is going well so far. Today, I'll be presenting how to bounce back, building a resilient mind. First, a little bit about me. My name is Danielle Winnick, and I'm currently a junior at the University of Iowa. I'm studying health and human physiology, and I'm also getting a certificate in resilience and trauma-informed perspectives. And so what this certificate allows me to do is really take classes that help me view what trauma, how that affects people, and how that affects everyone at different stages in their life. And I've also learned a lot of skills that can help me in my personal life as well as my professional life. So I'm excited to share those with you today as well. I'm from Amana, Iowa, and a fun fact about me is that I love to go fishing. The picture on the right is a picture of myself holding a bluegill I caught early last summer. So now I'll go over the definition of resilience, and I'll cover some statistics related to workplace resilience. And then I'll go over the benefits of being a highly resilient person and also the consequences of having low resilience. And then I'll also talk about some strategies of how to build resilience. But first, I'm going to ask for some audience participation. So in the chat function, just tell me one thing you think of when you hear the word resilience. Okay, I'm seeing some great answers here. We have flexible, bouncing back, overcoming a negative event, staying strong, getting back up, strength, patience. These are all really good answers. So I think you'll hear me talk about some of that language throughout the rest of the presentation as well. And so now the definition of resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover from difficulties, stress, and adversity. But another thing to mention is that it is both innate and acquired. So just who we are right now, that's our innate resilience and like the skills that we have when we come across a negative event in our life. But it can also be acquired in that we can improve those skills and we can build upon our resilience. And so some other words that I heard some other people talk about that are synonymous with resilience is flexibility, adaptability, and mental toughness. And lastly, there is like a positivity aspect to resilience. So I think you'll see that as I talk about the strategies later on. And there are many things right now going on in the world that could be contributing to lower levels of resilience. So for example, adversity and stress, that might look like a hardship on the job, or for example, unemployment issues and daycare issues with scheduling. That puts a lot of stress on family and individuals as well. Secondly, we're also just in a world of unknown. Nobody quite knows when this pandemic is going to be over or when we'll be done wearing masks. So that kind of just lowers the overall motivation and hope everyone has. And isolation and COVID fatigue, those two kind of go hand in hand. You know, we're not really supposed to be hanging out with people outside of our living quarters. So that decreased social connection is really hard on people. And lastly, trauma. If you've had COVID-19, you know someone who's had it, or maybe even a friend or a family member has unfortunately passed away from that. That can be very traumatizing as well. And then some resilience statistics. According to the ADP Research Institute, which is an organization that collects data around the world of work, and it collects information on economic indicators and conditions. According to their studies, only 19% of US workers are highly resilient. So on the other hand, 81% are vulnerable to the effects of stress and adversity. And so that's a big issue because that's correlated with a higher rate of workplace injury, less cohesion amongst coworkers, and also just lower productivity in general. And then the last statistic, those who love what they do are 4 times more likely to be highly resilient. And so this can apply to your personal life or your professional life. So either at home or on the job. If you find that purpose in your life or in those 2 areas of your life, you'll find that you'll be far more resilient and headstrong rather than just going through the motion in work and in life. And so for some of us, that might be also developing a more positive attitude or outlook on life. And so, like I mentioned before, positivity goes hand in hand with resilience because it helps us be more creative, motivated, and overall just helps us combat the negative effects of stress. And so we really want to focus on trying to rewire our brains to think positively. And the way that our brains does that is through neuroplasticity. So that's just essentially the way the brain can rewire itself at its synaptic level. And so when we do this, we want to think about building positive experiences into our life and focus on a positive to negative ratio of 3 to 1. So meaning when we have one negative experience in our life, we want to try to come up with 3 positive experiences, like, maybe complimenting ourselves 3 times or thinking about 3 happy memories or finding 3 things you're grateful for. So that's just going to allow our brain to rewire itself in that positive manner, like I said. And now the benefits of resilience. So overall, it's correlated with greater longevity. So meaning just a longer, more fulfilling life. Whereas low resilience, you'll see on the next slide, is actually associated with some of those negative health outcomes that can shorten our lifespan. And so it's also just the ability to bounce back. So people who experience depression slumps or, anxiety bouts, people often find themselves getting out of those quicker or with more ease, and because they have those resilience skills to do so. And positive attitude, you just feel more in control of your life and overall have a greater satisfaction. And then on the other hand, lower levels of resilience, that's correlated with poor health outcomes or conditions related to worse health outcomes in general. So the first one being chronic stress. That's the type of stress that is prolonged and not managed well. So that's when we have chronic stress, the stress hormone in our body, cortisol, is actually elevated. And so that's something we don't want to have because it can actually be related to cardiovascular conditions like high blood pressure and heart disease. But it is also related to our immune function, meaning that when we are super stressed out, our immune system just does not function as well. So a great example for me and probably other students is when I complete finals week or midterms week after I've been, studying for multiple weeks on end and staying up late at night. I feel my body almost physically break down, and I usually develop a cold after those 2 weeks. And so the last one, insomnia, people that take their work stress home with them and let it kind of spill over into other areas of their life, that can actually disrupt your sleep and circadian rhythms. And so now for the rest of this presentation, I want to encourage everyone to think about something that you might be experiencing in your life right now that's hindering your resilience. And so that's just going to help us kind of put the strategies that I talk about into context. So just an overview of the strategies. First one's benefit finding. Number 2, write a self-compassionate letter. 3, make a set of self-affirmations. And 4, creating realistic goals. And so benefit finding is essentially seeing the upside in an adverse situation. So instead of it's not about ignoring the feelings we have when we are stressed or experience a traumatic event, but it's like challenging yourself to find a reason in the worst of events that's going to make you better, or finding something you can gain from that. And then benefit finding is actually correlated with having more purpose in life and overall happier relationships, along with lower rates of PTSD, depression, and like I mentioned before, better immune function and a healthier stress response. So now I'll discuss some of the benefit finding thought prompts to help us find the positive in an adverse situation. And first, I'll kind of walk through the steps, and then I'll also provide my own example for each. But then after each of them, I'll give you a moment to reflect on what you could be doing as well. So for the first one, think of a recent negative, difficult, or adverse situation you experienced. So that could be maybe a hardship on the job, or maybe for myself and other students, it could be, I just received a bad grade on a paper or a test. So try to think of something. I'll give you a few seconds here to think of a negative or adverse situation you might have experienced recently. So then the second prompt is to identify any benefits you've gained. And so for me, that might, look like, okay, now I have the opportunity to relearn content. And often learning something from failure can promote more growth than learning it or getting it exactly right the first time. So go ahead and try to think of any benefits you might have gained from that negative situation. And then for the third prompt, reflect on what you learned from that situation. So maybe for me or students receiving bad grades, maybe that signals I need to find a completely different study technique since that one didn't work for me on the last exam. Or maybe it just means I need to start studying sooner. So go ahead and try to think of strategies that can help you and reflect on what you've learned from that situation. And then for the last prompt, how will you be better off in the future for having experienced this hardship right now? So for me, I think it'd probably spark a lot of growth and encourage me to find those better study habits and just overall time management skills. Okay, and then we'll move on to the second strategy. And so this strategy, writing a self-compassionate letter, it's very beneficial for resiliency because it helps us develop a kinder attitude towards ourselves. And it's important to think about how we want to talk to ourselves in a way that's uplifting and constructive. So think about when a friend comes to you and maybe they're asking for advice, or, they're talking bad about themselves, or they're struggling with a certain situation. So you might give them some advice and be direct with them, but it's not going to be in a way that's like degrading or it's going to break them down. So my question is, why would we ever speak to ourselves that way? So essentially, the goal of this strategy is to extend feelings of acceptance, understanding, and love for yourself as we write a physical letter or email. So now I'll walk through the steps and I'll talk about an example for each of them, what I might say in a letter, but I'll also encourage you to maybe grab a piece of paper or open up a Word document right now and try to think of or try to jot some ideas down so that way you kind of have a nice outline and you can complete the letter later on. So for the first one, pinpoint a negative situation you're experiencing. So for me, that looks like a lot of uncertainty and stress related to what I'm going to do after school, after I graduate college. But go ahead and try to think of something, maybe jot an idea down of what you're experiencing right now. That could be considered a negative or adverse situation. And for number two, just talk about how that makes you feel. Well, I already kind of said it makes me pretty stressed, nervous, anxious. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. So just describe some of those feelings. And number three, give yourself a gentle reminder that everyone struggles and you're not alone. So I'm definitely not the only college student to ever go through something like this and question what the future holds for me. And then number four, consider the reasons contributing to those feelings. So for me, I'm a very type A personality kind of girl. So it's hard for me to go with the flow. I need a time and date for everything. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest contributing factor to those feelings for me. And then for number 5, try to think of ways to improve your situation in a constructive manner. So for me, that might just be talking to my peers who are in the same situation and kind of getting a feel for what they're also doing, or maybe reaching out to my professors and advisors and trying to get more experience within this field. And so after you think of some ways to constructively improve that situation, go ahead and give it a nice closing to the letter, take a break, and then come back and read it again when you're ready. And so on the next slide here, you'll see I provided an example of what a self-compassionate letter might look like. So you can see at the top, I address myself, I state the situation, a lot of uncertainty and stress related to what I'll do after college, describe how it makes you feel, anxious, nervous, scared, stressed. Number 3, you can see I have that a reminder I'm not alone. And then I talk about the contributing factors as well. So the biggest reason contributing my uncertainty, type A personality, I'm always a planner. Number 5, constructive criticism, talking to my peers, advisors, professors. Then I give it a nice closing statement. Just know that everything will work itself out because life always does. You're exactly where you're meant to be right now. So after you complete a exercise like this, it's really important to ask yourself, how hard was this for me? And was I speaking to myself in a positive tone, or were my strategies geared towards building myself up or breaking myself down? And you'll see that those answers to the questions is actually going to reveal, how you speak to yourself. And as I mentioned before, speaking to yourself in a negative manner is what your brain hears, and it's going to wire itself accordingly. Okay. And then the last strategy is to make a set of self-affirmations. So like I said before, this is essentially just helping us rewire our brain to think positively and interrupt that negative thinking we are having. And so the main goal here is repetition. So repetition helps us build confidence in ourselves and our abilities. And also these can be done by saying them in the mirror, just saying them to yourself. Maybe you say it once in the morning and once at night, or maybe it's more beneficial for you to write them down. But these are really useful for us because it becomes our own type of like pocket language where we can speak to ourselves in that way. When that negative thought does creep into our head, we have that, in the back of our mind that we can repeat to ourselves throughout our everyday life. And then, so like many of my other strategies, the first step for this is to find a negative thought you have about yourself, and then you're going to try to counteract it with the positive. And so second step, try to start it with an I am or my statement to feel more in control of what we want to focus on. So for example, if I say to myself, I can never be confident and I make too many mistakes, try to start with I am confident and I am experienced and I know how to do the skills for my job. And some other tips, just try to exclude words such as don't, won't, can't, or phrases like I need or I want, because we're trying to focus on our abilities and what we can do right now. And lastly, if you're finding that, maybe this is too big of a shift in your mindset right now, you can start with language like I am open to, or I can learn to do this. So that way you can kind of see the evolution of your phrases in a negative. So if you start with your negative, like I said, I'm never confident, I can't do this, maybe start with saying I can learn to do this skill. And eventually you can take out that passive language and as you become more confident. So then this is just a picture of a self-affirmation card. Like I said before, instead of saying I'm fearful and not prepared for my future, I might try saying I'm excited and happy to embrace my future with open arms. And so, as I also mentioned before, you can repeat these in one sitting, like maybe a minute in the morning and a minute at night. And then you also have that ability to say it when a negative thought creeps into your head. So really whichever is beneficial for you, but you'll always have those thoughts in the back of your mind to use them throughout the day. And then another strategy is to create realistic goals. So develop smaller goals that prepare you for a larger goal. In my example, you'll see that I'll use the SMART goal technique. And essentially what that does is break those larger goals down into smaller goals and more actionable steps, which provide us with short-term motivation and long-term vision. And so this concept helps us guide our actions every day by considering that one thing or one step we could be doing every day to reach our goal. And as we perform those, we'll start to feel successful, and that success is going to build on itself. So as you feel that fire start to burn within yourself, you'll see yourself navigating your path like to your larger goal. So now the components of SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And so each of them kind of just has questions associated with it. So as you're creating a goal, you want to ask yourself these types of questions. What is it that I actually want to achieve? What metrics will I use, or how do I know that I'm improving? Is it possible? What actions will I take? Is it reasonable given the time and resources? And lastly, when do I want to achieve this by? So let's just say for me, a long-term goal might be I want to get back into cross-country shape I was in my junior year of high school. So a long-term goal is probably going to be I will be able to run 3 miles continuously by July 1st, 2021. My short goal action steps for this week is going to look like I will run in my neighborhood 3 times this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, at 9 a.m. by completing a 25-minute walk, jog, run routine. So is it specific? Well, I said I would run routes in my neighborhood. Measurable, going to do it 3 times a week, 25 minutes each time. Attainable, for me, I already strength train 4 days of the week, and I'm somewhat aerobically active. So this is going to be a good challenge for me to become more aerobically active. Is it realistic? I already work out around 9 a.m. And so it's more of just a change in what I'm going to be doing. And then is it timely? It's 3 months away, which is going to be a good challenge for me to make sure I stay motivated and I complete those 3 routes every week. So then lastly, some smaller ideas. So like I said before, resilience and improving it can look different for everyone. So it might just be creating a new habit, like making your bed every morning. Or maybe you want to start practicing those online guided meditations when you're starting to feel that stress. Maybe it's a nightly routine that you do before you go to bed. For me, that's brushing my teeth, skincare routine, gratitude journaling, setting my alarm, and going to bed. It could also be turning off notifications for a while. So for me, I have a lot of work this afternoon, so I'll probably turn off my notifications and just kind of get rid of that negative energy. And lastly, maybe you just want to call a family member or friend and tell them one thing you love about them. And then lastly, I want everyone to kind of remind yourselves of the one thing I encourage you to think about throughout this presentation. And then in the chat, tell me one actionable step you can do today that will help improve your resilience. And so, you might already be doing something like, you're working out every day and that makes you feel motivated to becoming a healthier you, or maybe it's implementing a new strategy that we talked about. But there are no wrong answers. It can look differently for everyone. Self-affirmations, a realistic work goal every day, SMART goals, setting daily goals. These are really good answers. Okay, building a checklist for my week, gratitude journaling. Okay, great. These are all really good answers. And so I just want to offer my final thank you and invite you back for the next Feed Your Wellness in 2 weeks. My colleague Maddie will be presenting Feed Your Mind, Brain Fuel for Better Focus on Wednesday, April 21st. And you can access her presentation with the same Zoom link. And also, Ride Your Waves is still open. We're currently in week 3, and we can put the registration link in the chat as well. But these are my references. Thank you.